Everyone, welcome to the Libertarian Advisor Show. This is episode number 1, so thank you for tuning in. So now that the post-election, euphoria for at least me and many others around the country has, I don't want to say worn off, but the initial shock is now kind of over. One thing I think is to keep in mind is that it's great that Trump was able to win. I worked incredibly hard to make sure that was the case. But, the battle has just begun. I mean, that was the battle that just took place. But now the real work begins. Because if we all just go to sleep for another, 3 years, 2 years, what have you, 4 years, then, we need to make sure that we hold these politicians' feet to the fire. We got to make sure that Trump doesn't get a whole bunch of neocons in there. And one thing that kind of disturbed me is on my Facebook page /the Libertarian Advisor, I had this meme where it was kind of, you guys seen the 300 movie where it's got, the one guy going up against, kind of against all odds. Well, I guess, it's 300 people in the movie, but this one meme in this case had one person. But what people were misconstruing about that is, I think some people thought that I was, a butthurt libertarian who thought that, Gary Johnson had some sort of chance at winning this when, because of Gary Johnson's own missteps that have been documented, 100 times over, whether it was other, vlogs I made, whether it was other, YouTube videos I made. So, quick rehash. I mean, he supported TPP. That's an anathema to libertarians. He had a bunch of milquetoast things to say, during his entire message. He had great things. He, as in Bill Weld and Gary Johnson, both on numerous occasions had great things to say about Hillary Clinton. So I think that, anyone who's a true libertarian, cannot be going around saying great things about, Hillary Clinton, who has left a path of death and destruction everywhere she's gone. So, I knew that those two jackasses, did not represent libertarianism. And I knew that with Trump, he at least represented somebody that, basically wasn't going to be bought off. And if he could do things like, draining the swamp, if he could do things like having a constitutional amendment to, enact term limits, and, if he can just, in his own good conscience, do what he thinks is going to be best for the country without being bought off, then guess what? We have a chance for some sort of prosperity. And the problem I had with the, more traditional libertarians, and by traditional, I don't mean the purists, because most of them were out as well. But what I mean is, a lot of these people are people that maybe just found out about libertarianism, and now all of a sudden, they think that they're the experts in this stuff. But when it comes to, Gary Johnson and Bill Weld, I mean, it was an embarrassment to the point where I didn't even want to have libertarian almost in my name, because I was so disappointed in both of those guys when I was, doing everything I could in 2012 to alert as many people about Gary Johnson as possible. And I knew back then I didn't have any, grandiose ideas of thinking he was going to win. I was just trying to, not deviate from my own philosophies, my own core principles, and try to get, more recognition for the brand. This time, granted, I think, they're up like, 300-400% from last time, which is going from, 1 to, maybe 3.5%. But, to take a victory lap on that when both the two traditional parties had, record low, approval ratings, record low dissatisfaction amongst them. And if the Libertarian Party wants to take a victory lap on 3.5%, great. You guys are going to be stuck down there for a long time. But what I'm interested in is with Trump, now that he's in, and what I meant by that meme kind of circling back to that 360 is that, if we all, just let Trump do whatever he wants and let him get away with putting, neocons in there. I'm not saying he's going to, but we need to make sure he's not going to be giving away, the keys to the kingdom to any neocons, to any globalists, no Chris Christie's. That's the last thing that we are going to need. And the other point is, and what I'm fearful is that, basically I think Jesus could be elected and, he's not going to be able to turn things around. I mean, we've gotten into such bad, dire straight position financially. And, if some of you are thinking, oh man, well, how can that be? Everything's going great. Well, do I have some videos for you? I mean, you can start by going to thelibertarianadvisor.com, where you can find different articles on how the GDP is rigged, how the inflation rate is rigged, how the unemployment rate is rigged, so on and so forth. I mean, and that those aren't the only ones. And another one is how the polls are rigged. And I think that after this election, I mean, why anybody would take the media seriously is absolutely beyond me. I mean, they didn't get one fucking thing right about this. And another thing about, all these exit polls, how can you have HuffPost saying, 98% certainty, this outlet, that outlet, they're all, damn near, 80 something percent and above saying Trump had no chance of winning this whatsoever. And I think what that did was it helped. On the one hand, I'm wondering, maybe some Hillary Clinton supporters didn't actually show up to vote because the media had already told them that, it was a foregone conclusion. So, hey, am I going to go, stop doing whatever I'm doing to go stand in line to go vote for someone that's definitely going to win? I don't know. The other thing it may have done is it may have taken people that wanted to vote for Trump, but maybe they're weak-minded people, so maybe they ended up voting for Hillary because, everybody wants to, vote for the winner. It's sort of like, your favorite sports team when you've got a bunch of people that don't give a shit, 99% of the time, and now all of a sudden, they're on some historic, path to the championship, and now, they've got 10 times the support than they usually do. So I think that, that may have been the case, but, I had a whole video on how the polls were rigged. So, again, not to rehash that whole thing, but it all has to do with, and it's funny because actually after that video that I made, I ended up getting called by the polls. And when it comes to, the Democratic candidate, there was about 10 follow-up questions to everything. When it came to the Republican candidate, and again, this was actually more like on a local level. So that's why I'm saying the candidate, because I know a lot of you aren't in that region, so it doesn't really matter. But, it would be like, okay, Republican answer, all right, who cares? All right, move along. But then for the Democrats, it's like, well, can you elaborate a little bit more on this? And then like 10 other whys to really try to boil down and get to the root cause of something. Whereas, the Republicans, they could really give two shits about that. But, what I'm trying to do is, just wake people up to how this whole system is a fraud. Whether it's how they count the votes, whether it's how they do the polls, whether it's how they give you the cooked numbers to begin with. I mean, it's all BS, whether it's the actual monetary system itself. I mean, everything is rigged. And for all these Republicans who are happy that Trump is in office, which, I'm in the camp that is happy that Trump is in office, that, we can't just fall asleep for 3 years. We can't just fall asleep for 4 years. We need to make sure he does the things that he says he's going to do. And luckily, the bar has been set so low for him coming on the heels of W and Obama, when Obama was pretty much anointed as the second coming of Christ. And instead of, following through on many of his promises, like, whether it was, decreasing NSA spying, like, we actually increased it. Whether it's being the most transparent, we actually jailed more people under the Espionage Act than every other president combined. Whether it's ending wars, actually I just started a whole bunch of new ones and other ones that American citizens aren't even aware of. Whether it's, not, coming after gun rights. Well, you guys may have lost on most fronts, but you guys certainly were doing that. We're going to make other countries, respect us again. That certainly isn't the case. So it's just, we're going to restore civil liberties. Well, Obama enacted something called the National Defense Authorization Act, which was also authored by John McCain. So, we'd be, damned either way, how people voted in 2008, that, any American can be killed and detained with no judge and no jury. I mean, that's not liberal at all. I mean, so, he came in like the second coming of Christ, and people are still giving him a free pass on how great his, everything he did was. Whereas for Trump, it's basically, people think it's the second coming of Hitler. So, if he were to get in there and do nothing, well, nothing would probably be a whole hell of a lot better than, going in there and doing a whole bunch of bad shit like we knew would be the case if Hillary Clinton was in power. So from a libertarian perspective, if Trump actually is going to appoint constitutionalists, if he actually is going to appoint, judges that are in the vein of an Antonin Scalia, then I think that'd be a great thing. But, if we had somebody like Hillary come in and, put 5 more Ruth Bader Ginsburgs in there, if we had her start World War III with Russia, if we have her coming in and taking the guns, we have her make all the illegals legal, and then all of a sudden we've got this permanent underclass that has been propagandized 7 ways to Sunday to basically voting for their own enslavement. There would never be a libertarian future, and I wouldn't say never, but the road would be 10 times harder. And and so for me, looking at the bigger picture, and maybe some people say I'm not a purist because I could potentially vote for somebody like Trump. Well, the fact is, it's because I'm a purist that I couldn't vote for Gary Johnson, because his things are just an anathema to me. But we've got a lot of things to unwind with Obama, and what I'm fearful is that the central bankers are going to pull something on him. I mean, if you look at the history of central banking, and again, I'm not even looking at any notes for this, but you had, the first one ended in 1812. The British came over here, burned down the fucking White House because they were the ones who openly owned it. The second Central Bank of America was ended by Andrew Jackson, who said, "You are a den of vipers, and by eternal God, I shall rout you out." And then, he was attempted to be assassinated twice. The guy said it was wealthy European bankers who put it up to him. But once he did get in power, the second central bank president at the time was named Nicholas Biddle, and he did all sorts of shenanigans like pull the credit, try to crash the economy, did crash the economy. And since, you don't have, Twitter and Facebook back then, and probably any media that you did have was probably going to be better than the media you have today, which, is saying basically nothing. And, the average person didn't really understand what was going on and tried to blame Jackson for that. So what we need Trump to do is to get out ahead of this. And I know he has done this, where he's called for auditing the Fed, via some tweets where he was, jabbing at, who was it? What's the guy's name? The holier than thou, Ted Cruz. So, he said, something to the effect of, so important, we audit the Fed, how could you miss that vote? So, I don't know, hopefully he wasn't just taking a jab at Ted Cruz, and hopefully this is something that he philosophically wants to do. But the good part is we've got guys like Alex Jones who are in his ear, who knows exactly what's going on with the Fed. So I am hopeful, but, the fact of the matter is we are 8 years into this, recovery that I'll say in quotes. And, if you want to reference some of my other videos on YouTube, I've got ones on, what is it? It's, I've got, you see these memes going around where it has, talks about what a great job Obama did, whether it was, raising the stock market or, lowering the price of gas or, having the unemployment rate. Well, it's a 15-minute video that completely demolishes that. I've got another, I think it's like 3-minute video that completely demolishes the fact that he, cut the deficit in half. So again, I don't care who gets in there. We've got a tough road to deal with. The derivatives, an absolute mess. The Fed's balance sheet is about, I think it's like 4.4 trillion last time I checked. It's probably even higher than that now. So what? We went from 800. It took us, from 1913 to 2008 to get to 800 billion in reserves, and then only 8 years to go from 800 billion to 4.4 trillion. So the Fed is leveraged, over 80 to 1. It's a complete, cluster that once interest rate risk actually rears its ugly head, it's going to unleash just absolute havoc. And I actually had a question that got that actually got to Janet Yellen when Schweikert, not my congressman, but it's the congressman, actually where I work, it would be the congressman from where my office is located, but not. Phoenix is a pretty big place, so we've got a few of them over here. But one of Phoenix's congressmen took my question from Facebook and asked Janet Yellen. So kind of backing this up a little bit, just to kind of give you guys some perspective on how this works, is when you've got the Federal Reserve, there's 12 member banks. They're all private banks. Those banks then get a 6% dividend of all the interest of all the debt. So right now, another way how they spin that is they give back 94% of the profit to the Treasury. So right now they're paying out the banks, I don't know, I think it's 0.5%, and they're getting 2.5%. So there's, let's call it a 2% amount of interest that they're getting off all the off their 4.4 trillion, that they're then pocketing 6% of that. Well, my question was, well, what happens if inflation takes off and you have to raise rates to, let's say, 4? And if we back things up a little bit, 4 years ago, they said the rates were going to be at 16. It would be 16 rate hikes by now, which means, 4%. So obviously that didn't happen. I've been, following Peter Schiff for a long time and agreed with his analysis that, the Fed was, as Peter Schiff put it, doing the Teddy Roosevelt approach to things where, instead of, speak softly and carry a big stick, they were yelling how big their stick was because they didn't even have a stick. And so my question to Janet Yellen, she actually said that my scenario was impossible. And that, I almost fell out of bed when I heard that. A fucking alien invasion is possible. What is this lady on? So, she either, she knows it's possible. What she can't let people know is that it's actually probable, and it's actually the most probable. But one thing she did say about that was that, she said that, well, there is a scenario where if things are taken off so much that we have to raise rates to kind of cool things down, and then under those, auspices, then, there might be that case where, that scenario might play out, but that would be a great problem to have because, it would be a great problem to have because that means things are going great. Well, I can tell you what, Janet Yellen, that's not how things are going to happen, and that's very wishful thinking. So, what Trump needs to hammer on from a central bank perspective is that, from day one, when this was created, the first dollar that was created had 4% interest on it. So at the end of year one, you owe $1.04. Well, if you only created $1, how the hell do you ever pay back $1.04? Well, now you got to borrow another $1. And so you create this system where there's always more debt than there is money. And so we just need an entire rewrite of this whole thinking, this whole system, and how everybody thinks. And at the end of the day, we just need to decentralize everything. Decentralize as much as possible. And if it can be decentralized, then it should be. Because every time something gets centralized, you've got the worst elements in government, the worst elements when it comes to just, people in general who want to then, take that over to then, just be able to impose their will and dominate others. And when you've got Trump tweeting out about auditing the Fed, auditing the Fed is basically code word for ending the Fed, because it's like saying we're going to audit, Anthony Weiner's laptop. Well, guess what? There's probably a lot of sick shit on there. So, if you audit that, there's going to be, a lot of indictments going down for people. And I think it was, Henry Ford had a quote that went something along the lines of, it's well enough that people don't understand the banking system, for if they did, there'd be a revolution before the morning. And I think he said that right before the Fed was even created. So, now it's about 1 million times worse than that. The reason there is income inequality is because of the fact that the money's being devalued. So if you had, let's say the minimum wage was, it was $1 in 1960. So let's call it 4 quarters. Those quarters had actual real silver in them back then until 1964. So if you were to then take those 4 quarters and pay somebody that today, that'd be about $17-18 an hour. So it's just absolutely, ridiculous that the main problem is the money itself, because our money is not money, it's currency. And it's backed by nothing. It's backed by war. It's backed by bombs. It's backed by the fact that my daughter is already going to be $1 million in debt because, we've got a bunch of assholes running things who are trying to enslave us. And I think with Trump, if he uses that bully pulpit appropriately, I think we've got a chance at getting out of some of this stuff. And, speaking of central bank activity, I see all these protesters talking about how Trump is going to lead us into fascism. A lot of them are spelling it, completely wrong. And I think a lot of them are probably too dumb to realize that what Obama has done, particularly through Obamacare, is fascism. So when you have the insurance companies and you have the banks who are then writing the law to then give themselves more power and create, monopolies and duopolies everywhere, especially in the case of Arizona, where my insurance 8 years ago I was paying $70 a month, and granted now that I'm married, so let's call it $140, maybe even round up to $200 a month. Last year, I think 2 years ago I was paying $220 for my wife and I. Then I was paying $550 last year. Well, now just got the new rate increases, $1,300 motherfucking dollars. So thank you to all these fucking dumbass millennials who promised me I'd have a bill that would be my lower than my cell phone bill. Well, now it's like it's like I didn't realize they were talking about like my annual bill was going to be monthly, and I see all these people laughing like, ha ha ha, like you've got to figure that out now. And it's like, you guys don't understand that you guys are killing small business. And that's another thing. I mean, Arizona just voted to raise minimum wage to $12 an hour by 2020. Now I've got interns, and I pay one of them, $11 an hour because she does a great job for me, and I, want to reward her. Well, now $11 an hour is going to be illegal. But what I can do is, if I want to, I can pay interns nothing. So I can pay them nothing, but it's illegal for me to pay them $10 an hour. I mean, and I would say in almost every case, they are definitely learning more than they're learning, in school, in their propaganda factory. So, and I'm paying them to teach them, I'm grateful for the help, but it does take, a lot of mental energy to have to, always find something for them to do, having to, you've got one train of thought, and they come in and you need to stop everything you're doing to then figure out something else for them to do. So, there is some stress involved in that, stress and keeping payroll, everything else. And it's just like, we just keep making things harder and harder and harder. And the end result is I'm just going to outsource everything. I mean, I can get guys, to do, website design over in, England. I can get, payroll companies. I can get, basically, I have virtual receptionists, you name it. I'm trying to outsource it via third parties, because the most dangerous thing you can do now is pretty much hire somebody with all the new laws that they have. And, and when it comes to, fascism, you've got central banks who are openly buying up the bonds of companies. So that is the actual state and corporate merger known as fascism. And it's actually above fascism because those central banks are all privately owned. So it's even worse than fascism. And I don't hear a fucking word from any liberals about that. And when I say liberal, I don't even mean liberal in the sense of, classical liberal Thomas Jefferson. I mean authoritarianism. Because I think a lot of us out there, a lot of people listening to this, from an actual real liberal perspective, we probably are classical liberals. Constitutionalists are classical liberals. And these are not liberals. These are absolute authoritarian babies. These are brown shirts. And the worst part about it is they don't even know they're brown shirts. And I think, when it comes to real liberals, I actually get along with them quite nicely. And when it comes to people like Julian Assange, who, calls out bullshit from the left and the right. When it comes to, I think there was a lady, and we'll cue this up in a post, but there was a lady who was at, I think it was at one of the California conventions, this older lady, probably like 80 years old, who was a Bernie supporter, and she's not talking about the things that Trump might do. She was talking about the things that Hillary's already done to subvert the democracy, to subvert,
I don't give a fuck about Trump, okay? Trump is dangerous for this country, and so is Hillary Clinton. What's she going to do for me? What's she going to do for my children? What is she going to do for my community? Is she going to frack the hell out of it? Is she going to put more of the soldiers on the ground?
I love this woman. She's a delegate.
Do you believe one damn word a woman like her says? How can America believe this when yesterday she proved to us that when you're a corrupt person, she's going to promote you? What did she do with Debbie Wasserman Schultz?
Exactly.
She promoted her. So what does that say about the Democratic Party? We need to clean house. We need to clean house.
I want to. Don't have and talk.
Yes. We need to clean house, and I hope everybody understands the seriousness of this.
Right.
If we, the people, do not get behind democracy harder than we ever have in our entire lives, we're not going to have any democracy. People have been laughing at me and, oh, well, they've been saying that forever. Do you remember this? Do you remember that? What I remember is that by the thousands and hundreds of thousands in this election, people were wiped off the voter rolls. People's affiliation with one party was flipped to another. Did we hear the leaders of the Democratic Party, including President Obama, get out and try to do anything about it?
Nothing.
No. We've got to stop it. We've got to clean house. We've got to demand it. We've got to stay with ourselves and build this revolution. Bernie wants to help us build a revolution. But I'm not a sheep for Bernie or anybody else, and I will not spend what few years I've got left on this earth to help someone like Hillary Clinton. So come take my credentials.
So you've got all these, babies running around, getting paid from Soros to go stir shit up. And, you've got all this, love Trump's hate. And I just came out with a meme, or not a meme, but it's probably a 4-minute video where it shows, Hillary with her voice cracking saying, "Love Trump's hate." And I did it terrible.
Love Trump's hate. Love Trump's hate.
There, but, her voice crackles. And then I've got it queued up where you've got, all these, basically Trump supporters getting either the shit kicked out of them or getting, bloodied or beaten up or, all these fuck you chants. And every single one I then enter, in between the one clip to the next, I then put the Hillary clip in there. But, when it comes to the media and the polls and everything else, I'm hoping people are starting to realize it's all bullshit. I mean, I've got my grandparents who are all, in a tizzy that Trump was down by 11 points after the second debate, with me as their grandson explaining it to them how it's all BS. And, I think one of the worst people I watched from a financial perspective had to be Charlie Gasparino. I mean, that guy's not even right about anything financial related, and he sure as hell is not right about anything Trump related. He kept saying, over and over and over again, Trump can't get past 15%. Then he can't get past 20. Then he can't get past 30. Well, then he can't get past 50. Oh, well, then he can't win the general. And we've all seen the clips where it's not just him. It's, basically every single other person out there who is saying that Trump can't win. Well, guess what? We won. You guys are going to have to deal with it. And for the people that did vote Trump, we are going to have to, keep on him, make sure he doesn't put the neocons in there, and realize that the war has just begun. From everything I just told you guys, we've got a hard road to fight, and this is now not the time to let up. And in the future, if I start advocating for candidates that aren't Republicans, which probably is going to happen, you can pretty much bet your dollar on it that I just want to make sure you guys are paying attention to what's the best thing to do from a constitutional standpoint, what's the best thing to do from a liberty-based standpoint, and go from there. We didn't need to make sure that we open things up so that way it's not just billionaires who are celebrities that have a chance of bucking the system. We need to create an environment where everyday people can help buck the system, where we have more voices in the debates, because we shouldn't have to take over one of these parties every single time we want to get into debates. We need to expose how they're frauds. We need to expose how everything is a fraud. And it's just a Saturday over here, so I'm going to try to enjoy myself now. But this was a very historic day, and I just wanted to provide some commentary on it, because I think some of the things I'm saying are kind of getting misconstrued. And I'm so happy for everyone that has helped share all of our information. If you would have told me 2 months ago when I started this, I'd go from reaching 20 people a day to reaching 800,000 like we did 2 days ago, I would have laughed at you. 500,000 post engagements. I mean, to put that in perspective, that's more than the entire fucking Libertarian Party. That's 10 times more than townhall.com. That's we are, for an post engagement level, we are approaching InfoWars. We're approaching, not from, and granted, their reach is a billion times more than me, but strictly from Facebook on that one avenue, one platform. And again, I'm sharing their stuff too. So, we're trying to, it's not a competition, because, I helped get inspired by him. So, we're not, in competition here. And really, I'm trying to build up, 1,000 more of me, because we need to expose how this is a fraud. And if we can have, 1,000 people, reaching 1,000 people, that'd be 1 million. But, if we could have, 1,000 people reaching 1 million people, well then, there we go. The system would stand no chance. So, don't wait for orders from headquarters. Start doing some things on your own. Start doing your own activism. And more importantly than anything, don't believe what you hear in the media. So, it's been real. Thank you guys for listening to my first ever podcast, and hope you guys have, a great week. And just remember to make sure we keep Trump's feet to the fire, and that he does what he says he does, because if we do, then we do have a chance to make America great again. Take care.